Hello. Sorry. Hi. Sorry, we had some technical issues because of which we got a little late. But welcome to as you are WeWednesday, and today we'll be having somebody from ReStory team. Let me just check and see if they're available and ready.
Hi,
Hello.
am I audible?
Hi. Yes, yes, I can hear you. Sorry about
Hi,
the delay.
no worries.
How was your day? How's it going?
Going all right. How about yours?
Good, good. So, would you want to introduce yourself or
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Sahiti. I'm with the ReStory Project. We're a bunch of queer-affirmative counselors.
wonderful? And you offer services online as well as offline?
No, currently they're just online.
Okay. Uh, when was it that you guys started? And tell us a little more about the services that you offer.
Yeah, so me and the co-founder Anvita, we met in college and we we were looking at what we had learned as therapists.
Right.
And one of the things that they keep talking about is how counselors are supposed to be objective. But at the same time, we thought when that was spoken about, the social realities that queer people often faced weren't taken into perspective. Um,
Right.
because when you are objective, you also kind of some people might take away from that they can't take a stance on political and social issues. And
Right.
we thought that especially important when you're dealing with queer clients, because some of the stressors that they might face come up because of these realities that they live in. So we thought that was something that was really important to us, and that's what we wanted to focus on through counseling.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. So let me just get into the first question
Mm.
we had, and which is what do you mean queer affirmative? What do you mean trauma informed? How is it different from uh, why is it actually important that somebody is queer affirmative versus just like somebody who's not necessarily queer affirmative?
Mm. Well, for one, queer affirmative is a step further than queer friendly, which is another term that you might have heard.
Right,
So when people say that they're queer friendly, they might say that, we acknowledge that people with different sexual orientations or gender identity exists, and we accept them, but it doesn't take a step further than that, which is what queer affirmative therapy is about. Because while a queer friendly therapist might acknowledge a queer client's identity, might accept it, might not discriminate against the client, um, it doesn't necessarily take into consideration a lot of the other work that has to be done to benefit the client in therapy. And this can look like using queer inclusive language, asking, it can be as simple as asking the client what their preferred pronouns are,
right,
what their preferred name is, but it can also mean doing a little more work with learning about queer history, the laws that affect queer
right,
individuals, with learning about resources out there for queer people, keeping them handy, and also acknowledging that we also have our own biases. Since mental health professionals have also been exposed to the same social conditions, we
right,
also grow up with possible unconscious biases that we also have to tackle and challenge, not just and acknowledging that not just in ourselves but also in others. And sometimes it might mean unlearning things that we have learned professionally as well. So
right.
yeah, that is essentially what queer affirmative therapy is. If we talk about trauma informed therapy, so that's about the easiest way to explain it is changing the narrative from what has happened to this person to what
Right.
um, changing the narrative from what's wrong with this person to what has happened to this person. And so basically, trauma is when there's a situation that is distressing or harmful to an individual, and it could be anything from like a natural disaster, an accident, or
Right.
assault. And when an individual perceives it as something that is that they cannot cope with, where they feel helpless, where they feel like they can't function, that's when that incident is termed traumatic. And the thing is, a lot of queer people, especially, need to when they're exposed to situations that might be traumatic. These situations might not be considered traumatic by some people because they
Right.
might not be aware that for example, they might not be aware of microaggressions. They might not be aware that such situations can be distressing for queer individuals. So it's especially important for mental health professionals to be trauma informed and queer affirmative together. And being trauma informed means being aware of what trauma is, how the symptoms manifest for queer individuals,
Right.
and also trying to use practices that don't re traumatize the person, which means being
Right.
sensitive while asking questions, even being transparent, telling the person, this is why I'm asking you this question. It's
Right.
about setting up this collaborative relationship instead of it being one sided.
Right.
So it empowers the individual, it makes them feel more safe in this professional relationship.
Right.
And feminist therapy is also about empowering the individual.
Right.
It's recognizing that there's these social structures that have oppressed people for a while, and some of their mental health concerns, some of their stresses that they're facing come about because of this interaction that they're having with these structures. It's acknowledging that there's categorizations like gender, class, sexuality,
Right.
all of them play a role in the stressors that people are dealing with, and
Right.
it's acknowledging this and trying to make the client feel empowered in the therapy space, at least telling them that we acknowledge these social realities and we're trying to give you a choice here in this room about how you would like to go about your own process of dealing with your concerns.
I think somewhere by uh, by the situations that they face, getting validated in a certain space, which is the therapy space, they somewhere, I feel, it somewhere helps the individual
Mm.
um, affirm that feeling ki, no, this is traumatizing. Because I've noticed this with queer people, especially when you were mentioning earlier ki, some things can be traumatic for queer people, while other things, for other people, it might not. Like, for example, tiny instances of homophobia or queer phobia, which again, like I don't know, randomly when somebody is walking in, like somebody walking, and if it's a cis man and they, I mean, perceived cis man, and they're walking feminine, and somebody makes a joke of that, right? Not everybody might get triggered, but in queer people, it might bring out some kind of frustration or some kind of reaction, right? And then if it's a group of friends, obviously they'll be like, oh yeah, this is just a joke. Why do you have to react, right? So I think this actually gives a very good segue into the next thing that I was going to ask. Why is it important? Like, I think I don't think this question again is specifically with a queer perspective, but in general, also something that I have noticed is that, oh, you have a great set of friends. Why do you need therapy? Oh, uh, you don't look like you need therapy. Are just call up a couple of friends and talk. It's fine. You don't need therapy. So like how do you tell, so I'm not like not tell somebody, but obviously it is different, but I want to hear from you how is it different, rather than just talking to a friend versus going to a therapist who is queer informed, who is queer affirmative, trauma informed, and feminist affirmative.
Mhm. For one, when you go to a therapist, you are going to somebody who is trained to be objective, who can give you this third person, not personally involved perspective on your situation. And for some people, especially queer people, that might be really important because the
Hmm.
people around them might have very strong opinions on issues that are very sensitive to them. And to
Hmm.
come to a place where you can have a non-judgmental perspective on it,
Hmm.
where you can talk freely about some of these concerns without worrying about what the individual will think about you after that, or how that might affect your life, it can be very powerful. It can be very freeing just to be able to speak about these things that might be on their mind. Um, and it can be a place to vent, it can be a place to get insight on what you might be dealing with, it can be a place to find clarity, to set goals, to track progress on goals, to work on interpersonal skills and relationships. And again, for queer individuals, sometimes talking about those relationships with friends or family, if you're not out to them, that's not easy. So having somebody who can hear you out there can be really beneficial to the person who goes to therapy.
And again, another thing that I do notice a lot of therapists do is, recommend that people join a support group, or typically, like right now, we have a lot of support groups, but online or offline support groups. And this is something, so I'm a peer counselor, and this is something I do also. But as a counselor, how do you uh, how do you see the benefits in somebody who is going to a support space versus who doesn't have any support system around them? Or how do you think this helps their overall healing of queer people as an individual?
Well, for one, I feel that it's really helpful for queer individuals who are just starting out and exploring their identities and just trying to define themselves, because they need that support, they need accurate information, and sometimes they can find that in those community spaces. And just being able to share their experiences freely, being able to give encouragement, help to other people in the same situation, and even receiving the same from these people, that can be really helpful to them in their journey of trying to figure out who they are. And also, when they see older queer individuals who have been through the same things, they can be great positive role models for them. They can give them advice because they've been through the same situation. And they can kind of instill hope for the future, because you can look at them and say, okay, they've made it. They've gotten through a situation that I thought I couldn't get through. And that can be so powerful. So that's one great benefit from these spaces. And again, during the lockdown, a lot of people might have been with families who they weren't out
Right.
to, who they couldn't discuss some of their experiences with. And
Right.
that also causes such a feeling of loneliness. And to be able to get to a space where they can overtly be themselves, not only is that a way to deal with loneliness, but when other people tell them about their own experiences, they feel less alone in dealing with these issues. They feel united in this. So I do think that it's a very healing space for queer individuals. It's very helpful, and it helps with trying to build on skills that they might need.
Right. Right. So, again, talking about pandemic and loneliness and the burnout, and I know a lot of people actually did come out during the pandemic, but that aside, in general, what has worked for you or your team in terms of self-care, especially during pandemic?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, actually, we did have a lot of people, reach out and talk to us about self-care and what it means for them. Especially because there was so much blurring of like work-life boundaries.
Right.
There was so much instances of burnout, more anxiety, depression, and it became really important for people to look into what self-care means for them. But the thing is that it also means very different things for different people. And even for the same person, it can change across a lifetime. So what self-care can look like, it can look like physical, it can look emotional, it can look
Right.
cognitive. um, it can be as simple as taking a walk every day. It can look like prioritizing sleep, going to bed regularly at a particular time. It can look like setting boundaries with people, or making time to meet your friends every day. um, so it can be very different for different people, and at the same time, people always think that it might self-care sounds, like an indulgence, like expensive or unnecessary, or that we don't have time for it. But it can be very simple. It can be just taking 10 minutes in your day to even take some deep breaths, to walk around, to
Right.
stretch in between work. That can be self-care too.
Right.
So how we can decide on a self-care routine for ourselves is kind of just reflect on what your needs are. So asking yourself, what is it that me and my body need right now, to cope better with what's going on, to cope with my stress, to help myself function better. So that, and then doing that activity, and really reflecting on how you feel throughout it and after doing that activity,
Right.
can kind of help you come up with a self-care routine that works for you. For me, it was something as simple as deciding that I would take certain days off in the week to not work, and to not to make sure that my work-life boundaries were actually being respected by myself, and not
Right.
taking on more than I could handle. And I really found that helpful with maintaining my
Right.
mental health.
So I think it's something something very simple you said, uh, like understanding your needs, right? Um, like of late, in general, in my personal space, I've realized that knowing those needs, or at least even acknowledging that um, you need to know those needs, whether it's from a perspective of self-care or whether it's any aspect of your life, that becomes quite important, as well as the same thing, drawing boundaries, whether it's with people or with work or certain activities. I think, at least for me, those two, three things have been like of like something that I've been really mindful about, that I'm not doing or doing like during the pandemic. So yeah, and I completely agree with what you said when it comes to community healing, and a lot of times people come up and do ask, oh, there's like relationships are so hard. There's nobody who's like living, and I'm like, no. I mean, I've been in the queer space. I've been volunteering in the queer spaces for about like, I don't know, about 10 years or so. And I'm like, no, no, there are people. Oh, no, there is this one queer couple that I know in Bombay, or like, three, four people in Delhi. So that even that little bit of information, it does change their perspective. So, I mean, I really believe in community healing and community
Mhm.
coming together. It's something my partner believes as well. Um, so yeah, that piece of information is really like important information that's given.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are my questions, and I'll probably wait if audience have any questions. I'm also looking at my phone to see if there are any more questions. Do you want to add anything else?
I think with, like you said, community healing and talking about queer relationships, I think that's something that's a concern that's come up before a lot with queer clients, especially because they're holding themselves to heteronormative standards, right? They think that by this certain age, I should have everything figured out, I should have a partner, I should be at, a place, I should know what I want from all
Right,
of this. And
right,
I think breaking away from that mindset also is really something that happens in these spaces. And they get to feel more confident about themselves also. They see that, a lot
yeah,
of other people have also started out like this, have been
uh,
unsure about where they're coming from.
yeah,
Um, it just helps them see themselves more positively. And it also is a great space to talk about things that might be taboo, and because a lot of places outside, they can't talk about, like when they're having experiences that are new to them, especially with regards to sexual experiences. That's not something that they can easily talk about with other people, but talking about it in a space where they will actually get advice and not be
right,
fetishized or discriminated against for, it's really
right.
important for them to have these healthier relationships.
And again, these are the kind of conversations again we are looking to facilitate on our As You Are community as well. So we have a question that's come up. Why many lesbians are tomboy and many gay men are effeminate?
Well, that's a stereotype for one.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's one way of being a lesbian or a gay man. So if someone chooses to present masculine or feminine, that's um, very much a personal choice and not related to their sexual identity at all.
So I think like again, I'm not an expert, but from what I've noticed around it, what you said, the first thing that you said is it's a stereotype, and why I feel they've become a stereotype is because they are like they don't fit in the heteronormative template, so they're like
Exactly.
aside. So which is why they become much more visible and then stereotype. But yeah,
Yeah.
and the invisibilizing of other forms of queerness is just so much because of these stereotypes, and those are like very different conversations, longer conversations.
Yeah.
We have another question: how important is therapy when one is transitioning?
I mean, I think that's up to the individual to decide. I think therapy can be helpful because, again, it can be a space where you can talk about the process, you can talk about the feelings that are coming up with it, you can talk about how your relationships are being impacted. If you want, to talk about how you want to talk about other people, to other people in your life about this change, that therapy can be helpful there. But at the same time, I wouldn't say you have to be in therapy to deal with the transition. What you do need is a supportive network of people around you, people
Right.
who can help you through the process, and your therapist can be one of them.
Right. So I feel another common misconception that I see is, therapy is you don't need therapy. You're just depressed. You go to the doctor, get some medicine, and you'll be fine. Uh, why do you think you know how do you think therapy is different from just medicating and getting the problem solved?
Well, for one, even psychiatrists recommend that therapy should be accompanied with, when medication is given, therapy should come with it. Mostly because while you can, medicate, and what medication does is get you to a place where you don't feel as emotionally volatile, right? It gets you to a place where you might be able to handle your emotions a little better, but it doesn't necessarily change the underlying beliefs that you might have that might be affecting you or bringing up thoughts that are difficult to handle. So it is important to discuss these. It gives you a space to talk about your feelings, these
Right.
beliefs that you might have over a while, and it can help you reframe how you're looking at yourself and the perspective that you might be in the situation that you might be in.
Right. So essentially, would it then be right to say, therapy gets to the actual issue, while medication is something that essentially should be a temporary thing? Again, I think it will be generalization if I say, oh, in all situations or all conditions, medication is temporary. But I think in most situations, like you said, it gets you to a place where you can function, and then therapy is sort of like getting to the actual issue, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, yeah, in some situations you might need to be on medication for longer. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's always accompanied with counseling and sometimes even group therapy. And because the way that you function is also social, right? You're not just dealing with your own emotions, you're also dealing with other people.
Right.
So sometimes having a space where you can talk about these interactions, also developing those skills in like a group setting is also really important. So that's where I feel that it can be effective to also have to also be in counseling.
Right. So, Okay, there's one more question. And people, if you have any questions, please go ahead. And mental health mental health professionals in India aren't as informed when it comes to LGBTQIA plus community. Any advice to them on, or how can we do better in that department?
Mm. Well, for one, you can all like if you are a mental health professional, um, the responsibility of reading up is still on you. You
Hmm.
have to read more if you don't know enough about a particular area. You need to get resources. You need to talk to other mental health professionals also who might have done training in queer-affirmative
Hmm.
counseling, who might be working with other queer clients and kind of getting their perspective on it,
Right.
understanding the different factors that affect queer clients. And also, the second thing is just asking your client, right? What can I do to make this space more therapeutic for you? Is there something that I can change? Is there something that you want me to read up on or learn more about myself? And that really makes the difference. Yeah.
Right. Because at the end of the day, you want your client to be happy coming to. I mean, not all therapy sessions can be happy. At least they should feel better after leaving the session. And this is something my therapist always is like, I know this is going to be a hard place. I know you might stop coming after this, but I just want to put it out there. So,
Yeah.
and people watching conversion therapy is a medical misconduct, and there are ways to report if you feel there is anything of that sort. So, there are resources about that online. Do write to us, we will give you the resources. But yeah, at the end of the day, as hard as one session or two session or three sessions feel hard, at the end of the day, you should feel better about yourself when you get out. You should learn something about yourself, I suppose, from one session or two sessions.
Yeah. And I think
So,
another thing that really stood out to me, this is something my supervisor says to me, that like as a therapist, you one of the things that you can be is, yeah, you can, you it is possible that you're not knowledgeable in every area. You don't have to know everything, but being willfully ignorant to the point where it causes harm is where the issue comes in. You have to be open to learning, and I think that's really something that people who are mental health professionals can keep in mind.
yeah. I remember about 4 or 5 years back, a friend of mine had gone to it was not a therapist, it was a psychiatrist, and they had to literally go and educate this doctor ki, oh, I'm feeling this way, and this is the term, this is the language, and this person was like, oh, tell me more. So it was literally like my friend was taking to them through like gender and sexuality 101. This was like 4 or 5 years back, and I'm again not saying that people now know everything. There still might be situations like that, but
Mhm.
I'm just thankful that doctor was not like, oh, brush it aside and say, no, this is not, at least, like, although the burden was on the person, the client
Mhm.
to explain, it still was like a less riskier situation where they're like, okay, you tell me, I will listen. Versus,
Mhm.
oh no, this is all nonsense. You're like, I've heard very weird stuff from people. I've had one doctor tell a client, "Oh, you cannot be lesbian. You get your periods. You have your
Mhm.
uterus. Let's scan it. You have a uterus, so you're not a lesbian." I'm like, I
Mhm.
mean, what, like, and these are people who are like doctors and gynecologists. So yeah, I mean, I'm only ranting because it's important that you go to other places, make sure they're queer affirmative, or at
Mhm.
least if you don't sense something is right, reach out, look online. There are places you can reach out to find lists of better doctors. They're not the only option.
I think another thing that's really helpful about finding queer affirmative professionals is that it's the families of these people also that will get educated through this. A lot of families of clients also, sometimes they reach out and they think that they think that conversion therapy is the way to go. They think that
Right.
if there if their child or if their relative comes to therapy, it'll fix their sexuality. And it's really important to educate them as well. So if
Yeah.
the therapist is at a place where they have knowledge about these things, where they can talk to the families about this, this makes the whole situation a lot easier for the client. It eases the
Right.
burdens that they might be dealing with. So I think that that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah. It also depends on the parents, right? Sometimes I feel they will change doctors or therapists till they get to hear what they want to hear. That
Mm.
I think that's a different kind of struggle that a lot
Yeah.
of queer people have faced. Um, so yeah, looks like we don't have any more questions. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. I mean, we probably should, like, while we were talking, I could think of so many other topics, like queer milestones is something that can be in a topic in itself. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so many things that I could think of. We should plan and do this again. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your time, Sahiti.
it was great having this conversation with you.
Yeah. So anybody who's looking for a therapist, ReStory, and in the notes we will put the handles. You can follow them, DM them, and get appointments. And if you want to like just talk or like just rant like how I did about anything, join the community and you can rant there. Thank you for your time, Sai.
Thank you.